What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Dripping Creativity Podcast. I am your host, Chris Corvan, and today we have a guest who, despite his love of dark fiction and horror, describes himself as the nicest Lee Glenwright you'll ever meet. He is an author of multiple novels and short story collections with a dark sense of humor and a soft spot for loud music, reptiles, and classic EC horror comics. He's here today to talk about his forthcoming novel, Penance, and we're going to dive into everything horror-related and all that fun shit. Lee, how are you doing today?
Great, thanks. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Let's kind of just start by kind of introducing yourself to everyone and how you got into writing.
Well, you've already introduced me pretty damn well there to start with. My name's Lee Glenwright. I'm from a city in the northeast of England, where I've lived for most of my life now. To date, like a lot of people, like a lot of writers, I gather, started writing probably in my mid to late teens and gave that up as a bad job when adulthood first hit. But then later on, it's strange how things take a turn. I got to my mid-30s and I decided that I was going to give it another go for fear of ending up like some bitter, twisted old man who would constantly curse under my breath. Why didn't I try that when I was younger? So I just started writing again and got the bit between my teeth, so to speak, and started submitting short fiction to various anthologies. After the inevitable knockbacks, I started getting a few acceptances. Since then, I've been published in about a dozen small press horror anthologies. And following that, I decided to strike out into the realms of self-publishing. To date, I have published 3 short story collections and 3 novels, with the 4th, as you've already pointed out, about to drop in the next couple of days.
That is so damn cool and a great journey. I think before we even kind of get into all of it there, because you had kind of mentioned it there about rejections and getting those in. That's something that a lot of current authors, especially in my community there, are kind of dealing with. How long and how many rejections do you think you got before you started finding your flow?
Oh, I think I lost count. In all honesty, I think I lost count, and I think it was just a case of getting into the mindset. I'm not losing anything by this. I'm fortunately doing something that I love doing anyway. Really, any acceptance or any sort of popularity it's an added bonus, really. I think that's really the kind of mindset you have to adopt, and you just take knockbacks. And I think a lot of people nowadays say it's not a reflection on you. I think a lot of, especially editors, go to great pains to point out it's not a reflection on you or your work. It's just, the standard line, it's just not the right fit. But I tell you what, there's still nothing beats the feeling again when that first acceptance comes in. I'm going to be honest with that.
Without a doubt. I mean, even in any creative industry, probably any industry in general there, especially something that you're kind of fighting through as much as you possibly can to finally get some acceptance and recognition where it's like, so for those out there that are listening that are still going through the rejection side, just keep at it. Don't give up. You're gonna be fine.
Yeah,
it's gonna be great.
Especially in this day and age of social media, I think it's a wash really with writing advice, and hell, I'm not an expert. The only advice I could give is don't quit. If you enjoy doing it, then don't quit.
Really, that's the base of it all right there. You can't go wrong with that advice. Okay, so getting back into it here with your short stories and collections and all of that, you're very into the horror and dark fiction. What kind of drew you into that to begin with?
Oh, I don't know really. I think it's just the way some people are wired at the end of the day. It's just some people get attracted to that side of things. And I think it's true what they say, horror it's more than just a genre. It's a state of mind, it's an emotion, and I don't think there are many other genres of fiction that cater for that aspect. And I think some of us are just wired or filtered to be drawn to that side of things. I mean, it's like I say in my bio, it's not hopefully not a reflection on me, because I'm not a particularly dark person. I don't see myself that way. I think it's just the way my mind works sometimes.
As somebody that is the exact same, I like to think of myself as a fairly nice guy, but man, my writing gets dark. There's nothing better than tormenting my characters and really putting them through the shit, you know? It's just...
Nailed it, man. Nailed it. But I think it's the same sort of thing. A lot of horror writers in particular, I think when you meet them or if you get to talk to them, they do tend to be quite laid back, quite mellow, accommodating people. I think it's the same. I think I could compare it to certain styles of music, like particularly heavy music. A lot of artists tend to be like quite laid back, and they all say the same thing. It's the outlet, the art is a way of channeling out that aggression or those dark thoughts, if you like.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Kind of going through that, because you have mentioned before, and it's something that I have said myself, there is writing quiets the voices in the head. Can you talk more about that and kind of how you feel that fuels your stories?
Well, a lot of my fiction tends to start with a what if scenario. For instance, I think my first collection, Ripe and Others, which was my first short fiction collection, I wrote an introduction to that, which maybe I don't know if that came across as maybe a bit arrogant from my perspective, seeing it was my first self-published work. But basically what it was I like to start, what I was trying to explain was I like to start off with a what if scenario. Say, for instance, there was a piece I wrote for that, which took the premise of you've probably heard of the old W. Jacobs story, The Monkey's Paw. And I just got that story fixed in my head one time, and I just got thinking, what if the mother had answered the door at the end? And it's just little ideas like that, and I just take them and run with them sometimes. And when it comes to plotting and pantsing, so to speak, I'm a big pantser. I tend to write by the seat of my pants. I'll get a basic idea, and say, for instance, my most recent novel, Penance, you've already mentioned, comes out in a few days. Until I'd got about 3/4 of the way through writing, I didn't have a damn clue how it was going to end, basically. But everything sort of clicks into place eventually.
Definitely, and I think what's funny is listening to you talk about that process is very much how I described mine. It's like almost identical, of just like playing what if was always my favorite thing to do as a child, and especially watching movies, like going out of a movie going, what if this happened in the sequel, and what if this, and then you would take the stories and run it in so many different directions that just kind of became my personal game myself, was what if this happened instead of this. And I get it. I love it. It's fantastic. Let's actually kind of turn over to Penance here. So it's set to release September 19th. This will be out after it is released. So happy release day.
Thank you very much.
What can you kind of tell us about the story and the inspiration behind it?
Well, I'm just going to hold up a copy here. There you go. First look.
There we go.
It's a doorstop. There you go.
That's on. How many pages is that?
That runs to, tries to casually flick through the pages. 567 pages in total.
Oh, damn. All right. Well, let us know about this chunky book.
Well, it's been several years in the making, because various hold-ups got in the way over the last couple of years. Getting distracted by something else and putting it on hold, as is usually the case. But eventually I decided to kind of push on with it or be damned. It's kind of a throwback. I've been describing it as a throwback to more what I term the 80s style of horror. I mean, the late 70s and 80s were such a good decade for horror. And I found it quite a good genre to write in for, among other things, no cell phones. No cell phones, no internet. So I think they sometimes can be a horror writer's enemy, the likes of modern technology. But none of that in Penance. And where it stems from was a few years ago, I wrote a series of short stories for a magazine that dealt in Lovecraftian fiction, and I had this idea of, I don't know if I'm going to give too much away, probably not if anyone's read the previous work, of darkness as a living entity. And with that in mind, I wrote a series of Lovecraftian short stories, and I started bouncing around in the idea in my head at one point, how would that be if I updated the setting to a slightly more modern, I'm saying the 80s, a slightly more modern setting. There's some people who consider it more modern, including myself. But yeah, and I decided to take that and see where it would run with it, see where it would take me. And 567 pages later, there we have it.
So, in comparison to your other stuff there, are you exploring new themes or any ideas that you haven't touched on before? Or is it kind of a return to something you know well?
Well, it's strange because it's funny because when I first started out writing, like I say, back in my mid-30s, when I started picking up the keyboard again, I tried to separate myself more from the writing, but I have sort of found, as I've continued to find my own voice, there is a bit more of a, dare I say it, autobiographical element sneaking in. It's almost subconscious, I'd say, because you tend to write something and then it's not until you read it back later on you think, I know where that came from. I don't want to talk about where it came from, I don't want to tell anyone that's where it came from, but I know where it came from. And I'm starting to find that more and more, like I say, as I'm finding my own voice as a writer.
Definitely. So kind of sticking with Penance here and kind of focusing on the characters, the theme, and the atmosphere and all that. What can kind of people expect going into this one? Like, what readers are you trying to bring in?
Anyone who likes, I suppose, dark fiction, in this case with a slight retro twist to it. It's like it's harking back to, like I say, what I would term an 80s style of horror fiction, like free of modern trappings, so to speak. It's basically, I've got to write my old dark house story at the centre. It's an old dark house story, and it's set in a small town with a secret, as all small towns have a secret. Surely you know that. But yeah, and as usual, most of my fiction tends to be more contemporary, and I think tends to deal with the darker side of human nature. I think that's a given, probably. But yeah, there's plenty of that in there.
Okay. What kind of characters do we have kicking around?
Sorry?
What kind of characters do we have kicking around the story?
Well, for the first time, I tried setting it in unfamiliar territory for me. It's set in an American town, and it actually serves as a sequel to a piece of short fiction that I wrote for one of my previous collections. So anyone who's read that and then pick up Penance, they might find a vein of similarity there.
That I
It's
absolutely will.
typical small town Americana. I hope I've got it right. Typical small town Americana type characters. Each one with something to hide.
You know what? It's a small town. They all have to. I lived in a small town for a very long time, and I'm telling you, there was a lot of shit going on there. There had to have been.
Yeah.
There's no way there wasn't. All right. So we got like kind of the 80 nostalgic there. Is it more like realistic 80s or more of the kind of pop culture 80s side of it? Because we got a whole bunch of the difference flowing around right now in modern media.
Yeah, I think I get what you mean there. I think I was aiming for a more realistic, sort of downtrodden almost vein, as opposed to what I'm guessing you're going for as a sort of Stranger Things-esque pop culture references aplenty. Yeah, I've tried to forego that in favour of I tend to write in quite a downbeat style. I'm attracted to the seedy underbelly of things in writing usually.
Nothing wrong with that. Again, nothing wrong. I love that. That's awesome. So you are definitely known for more of the dark humor stuff. Is there any of that we can kind of expect in this book? Were you able to inject any into it?
Probably. I've read and reread the things so many times before publication, and you kind of lose sight of the bigger picture almost. And like some of my previous work, people have actually got back to me and said that bit was war, but funny. And it's like, you know what? And I never even considered that, but you have a point. And I do sometimes try to get a sort of dark, cynical, humorous streak in there. And sometimes it's deliberate, and a lot of the time it's unconscious. So I'm afraid I can't say for certain. It probably has.
I'm gonna say probably, yeah. When it came to actually setting it in America over well, I suppose south of me because I'm Canadian. Always go Canadian. Anyways, did you do a lot of kind of like research into the area you were placing it in, or were you just kind of going off of what you knew of America through media? Talk to me about the development of the atmosphere.
There was a bit of research involved, which I sometimes do if I feel necessary, and sometimes I don't. I just, like I say, fly by the seat of my pants. But I did try and get some research in there just to go for a bit of realism with regard to the setting, because obviously, like I've said already, I was dealing with, for me, vaguely unfamiliar territory.
Definitely.
So yeah, there was some research for this one. Yeah.
Good. Excellent.
And I think because what I've done in the past is, with my first few novels, they're all set in a fictional British town. But one thing I did was I consciously made a decision not to give the city a name. The reason for which was I, somewhere in the back of my mind, had this impression that were I to not give it a name, that might make it easier for people to identify with, if that makes any sense. It's like, it could be anywhere. It could be any sprawling, teeming, festering city. That
concept does make sense. I mean, like that type of thought is very double-edged, because it can go either way. You can either have somebody with a fictional town name that people end up relating to more, but at the same time, if you give them the option to embrace it in their imagination, it connects even deeper. It's really a reader-dependent type of thing for sure, but I do enjoy not naming things. I am a fan of that.
Man of mystery.
I love ambiguity in things. I like stories that are closed off and finished. Like, you know, your overall story, I want that to have a nice conclusion and be solid, but at the same time, I want there to be enough questions left unanswered about the world as a whole that you want to keep exploring that part. Like, that's what I want readers to come back and want more of the world, not just the story.
Yeah. Well, Penance definitely has a finish. I won't say whether or not it's a nice finish, but it does have a finish. Because, in the past, again, it's dictated by the story whether you leave something to have a definite conclusion or not. But in this case, I think it did have. And I didn't say it, like I say, I didn't see it coming. I didn't see the conclusion coming, but it happened.
Hey, you know what? It's in there and it's good. But that actually kind of brings up a very good point, especially around horror, is the debate of, does a horror thing, book, movie, or whatever, need to have a happy ending, or does leaving a reader with that destroyed sense of self at the end of it, is that okay to do?
Yeah, again, that's something I tend not to deal in the lighter side of things when it comes to endings. I once, I think, jokingly said, well, half jokingly said, that happy endings are for fairy stories, basically. Not for horror fiction, and that's not necessarily true. That's an oversimplification of things. But yeah, I tend to strive for, within the confines of the genre at least, some degree of realism. And the fact of the matter is that the stories I tend to write, there isn't much scope for a happy ending. Because when it comes to writing fiction, one of the things I'm attracted to is the sense of inevitability in a story. It's often the case of, you know, something bad's going to happen. It's just when, where, and to whom. So
go into it with a sense of dread and you'll be fine. That's the bottom line here.
If you're a happy-go-lucky person, lower your expectations.
You will leave sad. All right. So with horror being such a diverse genre, is there any specific subgenres or styles within your writing that kind of pull you towards that specific part of horror? And obviously the dark and depressing endings, as we've discussed, but are there any others that you're kind of interested to explore?
I mean, when I first started off, I just labeled myself just horror writer, basically catch-all description, really. But then, as I think you've already described, I prefer to use the term dark fiction author now, because I think it's such a broad genre, and a lot of what I do write isn't what I would term traditional horror, which is where Penance differs again, because I suppose it's more within the confines of what I would term a traditional horror novel. But yeah, I tend to go for the dark fiction label. But in the past, I've been particularly drawn to concepts behind body horror in particular, especially in some of my short fiction and a previous novel of mine, Insatiable, which came out a few years ago now. That's more of what I would term a body horror novel.
So this always interests me, especially with authors and writers of body horror and all that. How do you kind of navigate giving enough description without losing pacing or flow?
That's a tricky one.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I've been having a bitch of a time with this one. This is why I like film and visual stuff. Way easier.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe I'm fortunate in that, if I can branch out from what you've just said there about film, I do tend to think I have quite I don't know if cinematic is quite the right word for it, cinematic, like a visual imagination. I will tend to visualize scenes in my writing as though I was watching it on a screen, and maybe that's helpful in that regard, because if you can visualize it, then it helps you pace it that bit better.
So I haven't read the short story yet, and I will, because I'm curious to see how you handle it. But like, there's a difference when it comes down to it between the giving too much description and not enough description. How do you feel you can navigate that one? Because that one is one of the trickiest ones I've seen. It's very hard to do when it comes to body horror and that type of thing.
Yeah, that can be a tricky process to navigate. I think it's just a case of striking it lucky. I mean, every writer is their own judge, if you like, their own worst critic, and it's a case of just going back through what you've written and thinking, is this too much? And there have been times when I have written something and I've looked, no, that is too much. Bit of self-censorship doesn't go amiss sometimes.
Do you have some, like, an inner circle that you can kind of send your stuff to kind of give that judge of, hey, is this too much? What do you think of this?
Not really. So far, I tend to rely on my own judgment when it comes to things like that. I mean, basically, I think a lot of writers say the same thing. Primarily, first and foremost, write for yourself, which I do. I tend to write the sort of thing that I think I would like to read, and by extension of that, what I hope someone else would like to read as well.
Definitely, it's definitely a good way to go. All right, let's kind of aim towards the end of the main episode here. So you are clearly a fan of horror movies and music, and let's talk more about kind of the EC horror comics art. How much of that do you see kind of going into your writing? What stuff kind of gives you your inspiration when it comes to what you enjoy?
Inspiration-wise, yeah, the EC horror comics, which I'm fortunate to have full sets of all the horror titles. Not the originals, because I still have both kidneys, but in the early 90s, there were a run of reprints, and I still have the complete collections just down the side of the desk here next to me, and I won't part with them for love of money. But they were a big inspiration, especially, I think, with regard to the dark sort of humorous element that creeps in sometimes, and the twist endings. Inspiration-wise, apart from that, one of my biggest writing influences, I think, is, it might sound a bit unusual, but Ray Bradbury, the author Ray Bradbury, who's probably my favourite author. A lot of his early work in particular is pretty horrific when you read it back. As a child, I used to go to our local library, and there were a series of anthology collections by, I think she was a British editor called Helen Hawke, and all these books had really lurid, garish covers and titles like Fear, 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 and Ghastly, Grim and Gruesome, and that sort of thing. And these were what would nowadays be called young adult books, but back in the day they were just children's books. They were pitched at children, but the stories in them were basically adult stories. And it was the first place I read the likes of Ray Bradbury, Robert Bloch, H.P. Lovecraft. There are a few Lovecraft stories in there. And so I got introduced to that particular genre at quite an early age. And also in some of my work, perhaps surprisingly, I've already described the fact that I have quite a visual imagination. Quite a lot of inspiration comes from films and film media. For instance, a couple of novels that I've written now based around this sprawling fictional city. It's in my mind's eye. I can see something along the lines of like David Fincher's Seven, for instance. Just the visuals in that are just so striking.
So it's a good one to pull from, especially from a visual, atmospheric standpoint. I love that. All right, so what can we kind of expect after Penance? What do we have in the works there?
I have started in the early stages bouncing around ideas for a fifth novel number 5. And it's a strange thing because I started off writing short fiction, and at the time I used to tell myself I wouldn't have anything to carry a full-length novel. And since then, I've drifted more towards the novel side of things. I find it easier. You can give more depth to the story, I think. You have more breathing space for the characters and for the story itself. But yeah, the ideas I've started bouncing around are kind of a follow-on from a few novels I've written previously. Insatiable, Meat Puppets, and Mutt are all written within the same fictional city, so which I've mentioned already. So for novel number 5, I'm returning to more familiar territory.
Excellent. Very excited to hear more about that. And then, kind of getting away from all of the writing stuff and just talking about you before we wrap this up here. What type of things do you enjoy outside of writing? Like, what do you like to do to relax and clear your brain?
The obvious thing would be reading, I suppose. Just the usual sort of thing. A good film or a good TV series, spending time with my family. I'm a family man. I have a family, and spending time with them. Also, as you mentioned right at the start of the interview, heavily into music. And I still every now and then like to kid myself into thinking I can play guitar. So
you know what? There's nothing wrong with playing guitar. Even if you think you're bad at it, it doesn't. See, my problem is I have really short, chubby fingers, and they suck for guitar. But bass, I always wanted to get into. Like, I love bass. Shit. See, but like, I love bass guitar. Like, I always wanted to learn. It's just with my brain, if I can't like get extremely good at something within like the first 48 hours, I don't want to ever touch it again. So I just never have that drive to keep going. But I would love to someday. That's definitely on the list. So guitar is amazing. Even, I just throw some pedals on there. Everything sounds amazing with some pedals.
Yeah, there is that. Well, I've been playing on and off for somewhere around 30 years now, and I think I've just about reached the stage where I'm like a semi-competent rhythm guitarist, possibly.
Well, shit, like, would that actually be something you'd want to kind of explore part-time, heading out there into the local scene, see what's kicking around?
Oh, Jesus Christ, no.
Come on.
When it comes to music, I'll let someone else take care of that side of things.
Do you get around to any local shows there?
Yes, nothing for a while, but occasionally when I can. Not very often, but when I can, yeah.
I miss going to like just pubs down the street where they're playing local bands. Just sit there all night listening to some horrible music, and every now and then you get like some amazing band, and you're like, holy shit, this is great. Yeah, I miss that. Oh, I need to do that more too. Okay, we are now going to turn into some rapid fire questions here before we wrap up the main episode and head into Off the Record. Again, I say rapid fire. It generally doesn't happen to be rapid fire, so take your time. We're going to start off with what is the one go-to horror movie of all time?
1968, Night of the Living Dead.
Solid choice. What about a book?
A book? I'm going to go with something really obvious and say my favorite Stephen King novel, which is Salem's Lot.
Good choice, good choice. If you could only write... Oh, wait, back that one up. Do you write to music or anything, or are you a silent writer?
I'm a silent writer.
Really? I did not see that
Yeah, there's no
coming.
shit I listen to. If I start listening to music, I just want to stop writing and bang my head.
Wow, I did not see that coming. Okay, when you were done writing and you're going to just sit and chill for a second, what is your go-to album? Or band? We can
Changes so often, man.
go with band. You just finished doing like major edit revisions on Penance. You're going to chill. What are you putting on?
Highest Blues with Red Sun. Or anything by Monster Magnet.
Oh, Monster Mag. Oh, God. First time I heard that one was the Heavy Metal 2000 soundtrack. God, that was so good.
Or Black Sabbath Volume 4.
Also solid choices. All right.
Hey, ask me one, you got three.
Hey, you know what? It's metal music. There's never just one. It changes repeatedly, and there's always like, oh, but this one.
Yeah,
I know how it goes.
That was the toughest question you've asked this time round.
It's a horrible question, and that's why I ask it. If you could own one piece of horror memorabilia that you do not have, what are you getting?
The zombie from 95, Day of the Dead. You know, Major Cooper?
Oh,
He's had his head removed from the brainstem.
is that actually out there?
Probably not, no.
Oh.
Wishful thinking. Well, there you go.
I mean, it might be. It might be worth looking
I'd
into.
sit in the gurney on the corner and scare the kids.
I mean, shit, yeah, why not? That's half the fun of having kids is scaring them. All right.
We're out every Halloween, you know.
Or just Christmas time. It could work for Christmas time. Which do you
Yeah, why
think
not?
is scarier? Supernatural horror, body horror, or psychological horror?
Oh, depends on the context. To me,
To you personally.
body horror by virtue of the fact that it deals with the very idea of the corruption of something that everyone takes for granted.
I have in the works right now an entire story based that just around the term enucleation, because there's not enough eyeball horror, and I decided I really wanted to do it, and I did it, and it's gross.
The old Lucio Fulci tactic.
All right, we didn't even talk about reptiles. Let's talk about reptiles, man. Come on, give me the rundown. What reptiles do you got?
Lots of reptiles.
Hit me.
Last count, 6 snakes,
Jesus.
5 geckos. We have 2 tarantulas, which aren't reptiles, but yeah. Actually, we've scaled down a bit recently. Yeah, I think that's it at the moment. 6 snakes, 5 geckos,
Okay.
and 2 tarantulas, which, like I say, aren't really reptiles, but there you go.
Who's your favorite?
Oh, it's hard to choose
I know.
because my first snake was a corn snake called Bruce. I also have 2 ball pythons, or royal pythons as we call them here. A milk snake, a Colombian rainbow boa, and a green tree python, which is pretty bitey.
You know, that's man. How big are the tanks?
Largest ones are 4 feet.
Oh, that's not too bad.
No, it's not too bad.
And then coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Perfect. And then the final, most ultimate, actually coffee. You know, I was expecting tea. I might have been stereotyping, but I expected tea. The final, most important question I'm going to ask you of this entire interview: where can people find you and your books?
On Amazon, primarily. All my self-published work is available for Kindle and in paperback. Other than that, also Amazon, because the work published outside of my self-published stuff, that's available on Amazon as well.
And where can people find you on social media?
I can be found on Facebook. I can be found on Threads and Blue Sky, usual culprits, Instagram, Slasher, which is a horror social media app, although I don't use that very often. And
I've never even heard of that one.
If this was a month or two ago, I probably would have said Twitter as well, but I jumped ship there finally. I hadn't interacted for about a year, and it was just drowning. So I took the gargantuan step of finally deleting my account about a month ago. So not Twitter.
I had to reopen mine because of this show, just so I could get the extra traction for it. It's the only, all I post there is just new video up. That's it.
Yeah, that's the problem. I had the same issue. Was, do I keep it and just post updates and just refuse to engage with anyone apart from that? But in the end, I think it deteriorated to a point where it really wasn't worth it, because I don't think I was getting any of that traction you talk about.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, and I mean, specifically for me, we'll come back to this one in off the record. So anybody that wants that, make sure to come back. Okay, and you can find the books and all the links and everything, of course, in the description down below. It has been amazing to have you on the main episode. Thank you all for listening. Penance dropped September 19th. Go and pick it up. It is going to be an amazing read. I know I'm going to be grabbing myself a copy. Lee, thank you so much for being here. Stick around.
Thank you so much for having me.
Stick around, because we're going to get to off the record here. So if you're part of the Creative Coffee Cafe community or the Patreon community, you guys get the extra free chat we're going to have here. As for everyone else, thank you so much for being here. My name is Chris Corvan. You can find me everywhere at Chris of the Void. And until next time, stay creative. Stay inspired. See ya.